I cannot even begin to imagine what that would feel like, and clearly it sounds quite strange. And if only it ended there, but that would not be the case, and one of the most infamous killers, Daniel Laplante, would take it way too far. So today we are going to talk about just that. Some housekeeping before we jump into the case. One, I will post a comment down below and pin it to the comments section, and that comment will have 3 cases that I am interested in covering, and I would like your vote to help me decide which one to cover. Request number 2, I recently made a Discord channel for Neon Moon, and if you are unfamiliar with Discord, it is an app that is used as another kind of communication platform. It is secure and safe and free to use, and it is a safe space for all of the Neon Moon angel babies to get together and chat. You can send private messages on there. You can post in the group on like the public boards. But I felt like it was another way for us to connect if you're not comfortable posting publicly on YouTube. So I will link that down below with the pinned cases, so you can click on it and join if you feel so inclined. I would love for you to do so. And then third and final request, please give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe to the channel if you like the content that you hear today. Okay, so housekeeping has finished, and we are going to jump into this crazy story together. And I'm gonna take a quick sip of my hot tea before we get started. I find that having hot tea while I film really helps the way that my voice comes across. So, hold please. Delicious. Many horror stories flip the notion, you could say, that a home should be safe and protected, and then they go and turn it into a place of nightmarish terror and fear, right? Especially if you've watched any kind of horror film or listened to a lot of these true crime cases, I'm sure you would agree that that is correct. Horror turns home security on its head by giving us haunted houses, poltergeists, home invasions, and secrets in the basement. And like many great stories, most are based on some element of truth, and none more so than this one. This one will be about the killer who hid in the walls of a family home and made them believe it was haunted. So, we're being given a haunted house and home invasion tale in one. This case will take place in Townsend, Massachusetts in 1986. One of the main characters of this story is 16-year-old schoolgirl Annie Andrews. She was very excited to be going on a date with a boy by the name of Daniel Laplante. Now, the way that Annie and Danny had connected was that she had received a phone call from Danny, who claimed to be the friend of a friend. They would talk on the phone several times leading up to their meeting, and Danny would describe himself to her as tall, blonde, and athletic. cancer. So being 16 years old, I think that moving through this grief process, she really was looking for some comfort and joy in her life. So when she gets this call from Danny, who claims to be a friend of a friend and supposedly lived nearby in the neighborhood, she is excited to have this newfound connection with the boy and kind of see where it would go. So, like I said, they would talk on the phone from time to time and kind of get to know each other that way, and she agrees to go on a date with him, but she would come to regret that choice soon after. Before I go into their face-to-face encounter, I will talk about the family here just for a brief moment. So, Annie lived with her father, Brian, and her younger sister, Jessica, in a large house on the far side of town. Her father was now basically a single father of 2 girls and trying to keep a sense of normalcy in their lives, given that they had lost their mother and he had lost his wife. And now his 16-year-old daughter is taken by this boy's charm, and she gets permission to go on this date with him. So now we can talk about that a little bit. So this is an interesting fact. So, well, I guess it's not. So Annie goes on this first date with Daniel, and rather than meeting him somewhere, she has him come to her house, and my immediate reaction is to say that that's weird, but it's really not, because they are only 16 years old. I know any time that I went out in my teen years, if my parents didn't know the people, they would want to meet them first for the most part, and so I know that that's not standard across the board. I am just sharing a personal experience. So I think it would be more uncommon to go on a date, like, without having met somebody, like, in public when you've never met them before and you've only talked on the phone and you're 16 years old. So I feel like it makes sense that he would have come to her house. So Daniel comes to her house, and she is expecting this handsome, tall, athletic, blonde guy that he described himself to be, but when she opened the door, that is not what he looked like. She saw that Daniel had greasy black hair and was wearing dirty clothes. He was not athletic, and Annie agreed with herself that she did not find him handsome, but she still decided to go on the date with him. So they leave Annie's house and they go into town and get some ice cream at a local cafe, which probably was like the only good thing about her date, and everything else ends up being terrible. Daniel was insistent that Annie had talked to him about her recently deceased mother and began asking very inappropriate questions about her sexuality. Now, I don't care what age you are, but I feel like that's really not a strong way to start a date, in my opinion. And once this transpires, Annie just ends the date. She's not feeling it. She's feeling quite uncomfortable and feels like Daniel has crossed a line, and decides that she doesn't really want to talk to him anymore, and decides that she's not going to answer any more phone calls from him. But she was a little anxious and concerned, given that Daniel knew where she lived. And despite that, though, I think, she parents, but also is like, what's really gonna happen? Yes, he knows where I live, but what is he gonna do? But little did Annie know that Daniel was far from finished with her. So let's go ahead and talk about Daniel here for a bit. So he was born in 1970 to a violent father who beat and sexually abused him throughout his formative years, which I'm sure we can all agree is incredibly damaging to one's psyche and just traumatizing across the board. And it also was confirmed that Daniel had also been abused by many family friends around the same time. And unsurprisingly, this level of abuse affected every single aspect of his life. And he struggled academically and socially. He did not have many friends, if any, and very much was an outcast at school, and was, basically described as the weird kid. And the school was aware of this and how kids viewed him and how teachers also viewed him, and so they had him sent to a psychiatrist for evaluation, who would ultimately diagnose him with multiple disorders. However, if you can think of the worst possible scenario for this kid, this is it in my head. So they send Daniel to a psychiatrist for support, but this same psychiatrist that diagnoses him with multiple disorders also ends up abusing Daniel and makes him perform sexual acts. And so it seemed like wherever Daniel went, he was being extremely harmed in one way or another, which basically makes him lose every sense of control and loses his grip on humanity until he becomes infatuated with Annie. So again, we had mentioned earlier that Annie and Jessica had recently lost their mother to cancer, and the girls decide that they want to hold a seance in the basement of their family home. They decide to do this in the hopes that they will be able to reach out to their mother and just tell her how much they loved her, which I think is so sweet and so sad, but just so sweet that these girls were trying to find any way of communication with their recently deceased mother. Now you might be thinking that something spooky takes place during this seance, but nothing strange actually happens in that moment. But what happens next is what is creepy. So after this seance takes place, the girls get ready for the night and get in bed, and they both end up hearing a mysterious knocking sound. And in their mind, they're like, oh god, this must be an evil spirit, and we just performed this seance, so we must have thinned the veil or opened some kind of, or given a spirit access to my space. And now here they are tapping on the walls and knocking on the door, and it would not stop there. This knocking on the walls continued at all hours of the day and night, and was really beginning to freak these girls out. I would be terrified. I don't know about you, but that would be a big nope from me. The girls would tell their father, Brian, what was going on, and he honestly just laughs it off and says that they're making it all up and that they should never mess with the ways of, magic or witchcraft after the occult. Like, you girls have no business doing a seance and trying to connect with the dead, but just brushes this off. But in the days and weeks that followed this seance, more strange things started happening. Sometimes the furniture had been moved into different positions, and items from the kitchen were found in different parts of the house. Items they had placed on the dining table were later found on the floor beside the table, displayed in an unusual manner. The knocking also continued in various parts of the house, and the girls would also hear it when they showered. As if all of that was not enough, they would find written signs on mirrors, and their underwear moved from drawer to drawer. But still, their dad, Brian, didn't believe them, and just put it down to the loss of their mother really impacting them in like the way that they were grieving. And I don't know, I really can't give a fair opinion on that. I don't know what that would be like, you know, but I guess I would assume that if my kids were telling me something like that, I wouldn't just immediately brush it off, I suppose. You know, I may not believe it fully, but I think I would do some kind of investigation to understand better. But that's not a judgment on him, I'm just saying what I think I would do. And then one of the freakiest things would happen. The girls would find a note in their bedroom that read, "I'm back. Find me if you can," and words written in blood on the basement wall. The sisters would come screaming and running, terrified, from their house. Now when this all transpires, Brian is at work, and the girls go running from the house over to a neighbor. And this neighbor reaches out to Brian to let him know that the girls were with them. Brian would return home to find the words in the basement had actually been written with ketchup and not blood. And this next part is just, oh my gosh, it freaks me out. It makes me sick to my stomach. So Brian makes his way upstairs, where the girls had found this note in their bedroom, and what Brian stumbles across is nothing shy of just, oh my gosh, I don't even know what the word is. It honestly makes me want to cry, and I don't know if that's like a realistic or reasonable emotional response to this, but it actually makes me so emotional. So Brian would get upstairs into the girls' bedroom and find Daniel dressed up in the clothes of his deceased wife. Now, as you can imagine, this probably made Brian's blood just boil and livid. Like, okay, this kid is in my house, you know, not allowed, unannounced. He's intruding, for one. He's in my daughter's bedroom, strike two. But number three, you are wearing my dead wife's clothes. Like, are you kidding me? So these two end up getting in a fight, but Daniel manages to escape and disappear, seemingly into thin air. Brian immediately reaches out to police and has them search the house, and when they search, they find a hidden section behind Annie's closet. When an officer found this hidden crawl space, he would go inside it to find Daniel Laplante curled up inside. Now, the investigation that would follow discovered that Daniel had been hiding in the walls and space of this house for weeks and had made many different peepholes into the walls to spy on the family in the bathroom and even in the girls' bedrooms. Now, at the site and scene of all of this, Daniel Laplante would be arrested on the spot and only charged as a minor, being that he was only 16 years old, and he would end up being sentenced to 10 months in a juvenile detention center. And one of the things that I guess just blows my mind is not only did the father come across Daniel upstairs in his daughter's bedroom wearing his wife's clothes, but he was also wearing a blonde wig. He had makeup smeared across his face, and he was holding a hatchet. So, like, how bizarre is that? Like, it doesn't get any more creepy than that to me, and still somehow that, on top of finding him hiding in the walls of the house, he only gets charged as a minor and goes to juvenile detention center. But while he was there in the juvenile center, he turns 17 in the month of May, and after serving his time, he was then scheduled to appear in court for a longer sentence, as he was now classified as an adult. This allowed him to post bail and basically get out of jail card, and even though there was a court date set for December 11th, he had absolutely no intention of showing up. And instead, he would return to what he knew best, which was breaking into homes. Now, before all of this happened, when he was in his mid-teens, he very much went off the rails, and he would step outside the law by committing a slew of break-ins. At first, this career choice of his was just to steal valuables to make money, but the more he got away with it, he began to feel more powerful, and that's when he kind of transitioned over into breaking into homes, not for the sake of, robbing them, but literally just to move things around, to mess with the owners and have this kind of mental control and hold over people. He would have this insane high and thrill from leaving half-drunk bottles of beer around and rearranging this furniture. And that's where that part of it started, but soon enough that wouldn't be enough for him, and that high would begin to wear up, and the urge to escalate to the next level became just too irresistible for him. So he was experiencing this feeling of scaring people and making them feel uneasy in their homes, but he was not experiencing their fear firsthand. So when he gets out of the juvenile detention center, he has bigger plans in mind. On December 1st, he would set out on the half-mile walk to the house of the Gustafsons with a handgun lodged in his belt, and he had acquired that handgun from one of his previous break-ins. The husband, Andrew Gustafson, was at work, and his pregnant wife, Priscilla, was at home with their 5-year-old son, William, and their 7-year-old daughter, Abigail, would be arriving very shortly from school. Now it's, beginning of December, and Christmas is just right around the corner. Decorations were starting to be put up and sparkling, but as you can imagine, Daniel was not in the Christmas spirit. was this level up, bottled up rage and anger and pain in his body that just came like exploding out of him after these years of abuse, torment, and rejection. He would drag pregnant Priscilla Gustafson at gunpoint upstairs, where he relentlessly beat her into submission and then sexually assaulted her. However, he didn't find himself satisfied with that, and he decided to shove a pillow over her face, placed the handgun into it, and pulled the trigger twice. And if that wasn't horrific enough, what he did next was beyond heinous. He would grab the 5-year-old boy who was just sobbing and so scared, and he would drag him to the bathroom where he filled the bathtub, then held him underwater and drowned him. Now, by this time, Abigail, the 7-year-old daughter, had just returned from school. And Daniel was just out of his mind at this point. Like, he was out of his mind before, but at this point, like, if you cross his path, he's going to take you down. And tragically, he would drown Abigail in the downstairs bathroom. Once he would commit those 3 murders, he would casually leave the house, and the neighbors were just completely unaware of the horrors that had just transpired. Now, Andrew Gustafson, the father, would return home to their house after a day at work and would walk into an eerily quiet house that was usually filled with the laughter of his young children and the sweet sound of his wife's voice. But as you can imagine, he would quickly be filled with dread, and he fearfully would climb the stairs and found the body of his murdered wife. It is said that his cries were so loud and the sounds of the ambulance sirens just reverberated around the neighborhood, shattering the calm of the evening. Now, Daniel would quickly become a suspect because items were missing from the house, and they were aware that he had recently been released on bail. The first time the police would question him would be on December 2nd, which was inconclusive because the alibi he gives was plausible but not entirely convincing. So with no real evidence to, support the fact that this was Daniel's doing, the police would go away, but had this sense that something was not quite right with his answers. And so the police would return later that same day for further follow-up questions, and Laplante would just panic and run, knowing that they were closing in on him. And within the next 24 hours, this manhunt would close in on him, and they would have a helicopter literally circling overhead with 50 officers on the ground and police dogs sniffing him out. And eventually on December 3rd at 6:30 p.m., a tip led the police to where he was hiding in a dumpster 11 miles away, with a handgun tucked into his waistband and a crazed smile plastered plastered across his face. The case against Daniel was overwhelming and indisputable. There were stolen items found in his mother's house along with the murder weapon itself. And when he was brought to court in October of 1988, he had this constant smirk on his face that is just creepy, and he showed zero remorse whatsoever. And as you can imagine, that did not help his defense team in the slightest. After his trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours before unanimously finding him guilty. The judge himself, horrified at the murders committed, sentenced the amused-looking Daniel Laplante to 3 consecutive life sentences that included the charges in the case of the Andrews family. Fortunately, Daniel would spend the rest of his life behind bars according to these sentences, but the devastation that he left behind would be eternal. You know, it wasn't just these murders that shocked the nation, but it was the creepy way that he had struck a nerve, you know, taunting the family, the Andrews family, as he hid from behind the walls in their own house, and then to move on to this just senseless murder of the Gustafson family. Daniel did try appealing for a reduction in his sentence in 2019, but the court withheld its previous judgment, and he is currently incarcerated in a Massachusetts state prison and will be eligible for parole after 2032, which, to be quite honest with you, I do not know how I feel about that. Like, that's literally 10 years away, and this guy is supposed to have 3 consecutive life sentences, but you're now eligible for parole in 10 years from the time that I'm recording this. Like, I'm sorry, what? That's, dang, like, I just don't understand. So, but I guess for now, and I hope forever, that he remains incarcerated, permanently behind bars, behind walls where he cannot come and go as he pleases, and behind walls that will protect society from the monster that he grew up to be. That concludes the Killer in the Walls case today. The torment of the Andrews family and the tragic murder, well, triple homicide of the Gustafson family, Priscilla and her 2 children. You know, like, this one's kind of classic in the sense that the killer had a very screwed up childhood, was horribly abused himself, and really just spiraled out of control because of it. And I shouldn't even have to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyways, because people like to troll me for some reason. That is not an excuse to do the horrific things he did. I am just always fascinated by the psychological component that goes with these kind of cases, and like in the mind of the killer, I'm fascinated by that. But again, no amount of abuse that kid went through justifies what he did. So, please check out my pinned comment down below. Again, you will see the link to my Discord channel, and you will see the 3 cases that I would like to cover, and please make sure to comment and vote. And of course, let me know what you thought about this case in particular. I absolutely love getting your opinions and love hearing from you. Thank you for joining me today, and